Este es mi conversación con la doctora URSULA Kampmann. No es ningún secreto mi admiración por Úrsula, a quien yo podría decirles considero uno de mis seres humanos favoritos dentro de lo que es el mundo actual de la numismática. Doctorada en numismática griega antigua, Úrsula se dedicó toda su vida a la numismática y con un éxito que no dudo en llamar envidiable. Es autora de una cantidad de auténticos bestsellers numismáticos, entre los cuales está el catálogo de moneda provincial romana de Egipto, Die Münzen der römischen Münzstätten Alexandria, en colaboración con Thomas Ganchow, y especialmente Die Münzen der römischen Kaiserzeit, que es el catálogo de moneda imperial romana en alemán y que en buena medida es el equivalente en popularidad en el mundo de habla germana a The Rome Coins and Their Values de David Sear, y que vio recientemente su cuarta edición. Úrsula es receptora además de una gran cantidad de premios y honores por su labor con la numismática, entre los cuales destacan el Vreneli Prize en 2002, el Otto Paul Wenger Prize en 2012 y el Barnett Anderson Award en 2015. Pero lo que coloca a Úrsula por encima de tantos otros académicos de renombre es su valerosa lucha, que ha tenido dos carriles que, en el fondo, convergen y se potencian entre sí. Por un lado, la difusión de la numismática. En este sentido, Úrsula ha sido curadora del Museo del Dinero en Zúrich, ha participado periódicamente en transmisiones de radio en Suiza y más recientemente ha potenciado la difusión de la numismática a través de su empresa, Numismatic Press Service, actualmente redenominada Fama Sociedad Limitada, y sobre todo Coins Weekly Münzenwoche, el sitio y newsletter bilingüe y gratuito que llega a coleccionistas numismáticos de todo el mundo. Por otro lado, Úrsula ha sido una verdadera abanderada de los derechos de los coleccionistas y de los profesionales numismáticos en Alemania, una abanderada cuyo coraje e iniciativa lograron frenar los avances del Estado sobre los legítimos derechos civiles de estos colectivos y cuya experiencia nos va a relatar hoy. Sé que los seguidores de este canal han esperado mucho poder disfrutar de esta charla, pero justamente por lo importante que es esta charla, no quise apresurarme en subirla sin haberla editado primero cuidadosamente. Previo a pasar a ella, les recuerdo que esta entrevista se grabó en inglés porque realmente mi alemán hablado es demasiado penoso y jamás sometería a alguien que admiro tanto a la tortura de interpretarlo. Así que, como siempre que grabo videos en otro idioma, les pido que vayan a la parte de abajo de la pantalla, al recuadro, seleccionen el recuadro de subtítulos y al lado, en la ruedita dentada de configuración, seleccionen español. Así no se pierden nada de esta charla tan interesante. Y ahora sí, queridos amigos, mi conversación con Úrsula Kampmann.
Now better when it works.
I'm so pleased to meet you, and it's a high honor for me to meet you. And
It's
I
a
am
pleasure for me.
so grateful that you accepted this invitation for this talk. I've been following you for a long time. I told you, I even have one of your books. You know?
Okay.
Can you recognize this as one of your
Of course. Of course, of course. That's one I've done for the Money Museum in Zurich.
Right, exactly. And it's a book I really like because it is a book that set the coins in the cultural and historical context, which is rarely seen in numismatics. This is a great value of this book. And yes, you can see how far your writings have reached because this is really the bottom of the world. So
yeah, that's a book I really like because it's a cooperation of three entities. First, it's my husband who has collected these coins. Second, it's the Money Museum in Zurich by Jörg Consett, with whom I have cooperated for more than 20 years. He wanted to have this book and he's now the owner of these coins. and me. So it's really a cooperation of 3 persons who like each other a lot.
Great. Well, so let's talk a little bit about you. I wanted to know, where are you originally from? I know you're from Germany, right?
Yes.
And but where you were born, in which Bundesland, let's say?
I'm coming from Munich.
Ah, from
which
Munich.
Is mostly known from football and the Oktoberfest. But I'm one of the very, very few who are really Bavarian and who are still able to speak Bavarian, who are wearing a Bavarian costume when they are celebrating things. So I wouldn't call myself German. I would call myself Bavarian.
Bavarian. We numismatists all over the world know that Munich is a very important, let's say, trade center for numismatics. There are so many auction houses, and of course, numismatic collections, especially what we see that the SNG München, for instance, right? So it's a very, very numismatic place, the right place to be, I will say, in Germany, right?
Yes, it's.
And you work, you live and work there, right?
No.
No.
I have moved from Germany, from Munich, close to the Swiss border. I'm now living about 5 minutes away from Switzerland, and when I say 5 minutes, I mean walking distance.
Whoa.
Yeah, when I take a stroll and I walk for about 5 minutes, I'm crossing the green border to Switzerland, which is caused by the fact that I have worked for 5 years in Basel and needed a place close to Basel, and I found this place quite convenient. It's a lovely place, and so now I'm here close to Basel.
Right. So this is, let's say, in terms of historical regions, will be the Bodensee realm, right?
Not exactly. Bodensee is a little bit far away from us. It's about 150 kilometers. It's Basel is exactly where the Rhine is making this curve to the north. Comes from the east and goes directly to the north.
Right.
And exactly there I'm located, and it's also a very, very numismatic place because Basel had the first numismatic public collection all over the world.
And it was the first Swiss mint to mint gold coins, I think. In the late Middle Ages, I guess.
It's
an imperial.
They had an imperial, and they had a mint there. But don't ask me too much about the Swiss medieval times. That's, I have plenty of books here. I have 6,000 books here, and I appreciate that we do not have to remember everything, but that we have books where we can look all these things up.
So excellent. Ursula, do you collect coins?
I collect medals.
Right.
I collect medals, and that's a funny story because when I came into the coin business, which was in 1987, so it's quite a period of time I've been in the coin business. I used to work as a cataloger. I was cataloging the ancient coins, and next to me sat a person who is now professor in Vienna for numismatics.
Right.
And he was cataloging the medieval and modern coins. And he used to have these brown sweet medals. The bronze medals which get a patina which is very brown.
Yes.
And I adored the color. It was such a beautiful
chocolate brown. Chocolate.
Yeah. And so when I saw what he was doing, I said, hey, they look so pretty. What does that cost? And at that time, coins and medals, they were at the deepest. The prices were very, very low. It was very after the high of the 1970s, and they were very low. And he said, oh, I will estimate them at 5 marks a piece. And I said, okay, when I start to collect, I will collect brown medals. And then I had the chance I got a present from an old lady from Munich, a wonderful, very historical coin cabinet. Mm-hmm. And she said, what will you do with it? And I looked at it and said, sorry, I now have to start to collect with such a beautiful coin cabinet. Mm-hmm. And so she asked me, what will you collect? And I said, I have known that for years, brown medals. And so I have a huge collection of medals in bronze, mm-hmm. but I don't keep them at home anymore. They are, unfortunately, they have to be kept in the safe.
I understand. And yeah. The prices have risen.
The prices have risen since then, and I'm very lucky to have a very, very nice collection of medals in very nice condition, which I bought for very low prices.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So if the medal is stripped from the patina, that is no longer of your interest because it must be brown.
Anything that is stripped from the patina is no longer of any interest for me.
I see.
Look, the patina is the most beautiful thing in the most beautiful part of the coins and the medals. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And it's such a pity that some people think coins have to be cleaned.
No, of course not. But sometimes we find a coin that is particularly interesting and it has no patina. And I have many coins in my collection that have no patina at all. But unfortunately, of course, there is a little pot they sold back in the 80s, 90s that was called Deller's Darkener, which is something that restores some degree of patina to clean coins. And
there are plenty of methods to restore the patina. And I used to have a client when I worked at the auction business, mm-hmm. who had a certain coin cabinet that was made of oak. Mm-hmm. And he just had to put the coin in his cabinet, mm-hmm. leave it there for half a year, and he had the most beautiful rainbow patina you ever could imagine.
I see. Yeah, here Buenos Aires is a very wet town. So in general, coins tend to have to develop a patina quite easily. But some coins, sometimes the darkener works, sometimes the climate works, and sometimes nothing works to restore a patina. Did you see that?
Yeah, what I have seen it even with modern coins, what they are doing now is that they protect the coins against patina with a slight layer shortly after minting.
Yeah.
And I was told that a lot of collectors of contemporary coinage do not appreciate patina because they think it to be some kind of degeneration. It's bad. It's they don't have the appreciation for this color. And there you see how much the market for modern coins and the market for classical coins is different.
Completely. Yeah. Right.
Absolutely.
Tell me about your studies, your university studies, and what did you follow? What were your aims when you started studying, and what you finally studied, or what is your final degree?
So when I started, I knew I wanted to do something with history and archaeology, and from the very beginning, I knew that when I was a 10-year-old girl that this would be where I wanted to go. The only problem was I'm the first in my family who went to university. So I had no idea what kind of department to choose in order to find my way. So I went first to Asian archaeology. I found, okay, that's not it. Then I went to classical archaeology. I thought, not for me. Then I went to prehistory. That came close. But I didn't have an eye for shapes of pots. All the pots
and that's essential for archaeologists.
They all look the same. So I decided, okay, let's try history. And when I went into the history department, I knew that's it. That was absolutely what was my focus. And I had my very first course in numismatics. And it was quite an interesting experience because all these other students who were sitting next to me, in Germany, you have these mixed courses. It's all different grades and all different years of experience and studies. And I was sitting there with all these other guys who had much, much longer experience. And the professor asked us to describe what was on the coins. And I realized that's my field. Everybody was there like, no idea, don't know. And I was just saying, okay, this is this goddess and it's doing this and it's holding that. And it was my field. Excellent. And until now, I'm a fan. I'm addicted to iconography. I think that's one of the really, really great fields in numismatics, iconography. But in the past, I've done quite everything I had to. I made my degree in numismatics with the Roman provincial coins. Excellent. I went into the coin trade, and there you had to do everything what they put on your table. And so for me, there is whatever you give me, I will work with it.
I kind of guess, Ursula, that the kind of experience you gain in the coin trade is amazing. It's uncomparable with anything else. The quantity of coins, the variety of coins you see, everything.
I think I have seen hundreds of thousand coins with these 10 years I've been in the coin trade.
Of course.
I've worked for the biggest auction houses, and there were so many coins for auctions. We used to have a huge stock. We had a stock of about 5,000, 10,000 coins. It's you see a lot when you are working in the coin trade. It can't be compared with
working in a museum, for instance.
Yeah.
And I guess you must have a lot of stories about that, right?
Some.
A lot.
Some that can be told, some that can't be told.
Would you like to tell us one?
I should have thought before what kind of story I would like to tell you. Yeah, I can tell you a story. At that point, I was one of the very few women in the trade. I
wrote one of your editorial notes about that. Yeah. I remember in Coins Weekly. Yes.
Yeah. We were about 3 or 4 young women in that trade. And I had my PhD, but people were coming into the office and they were showing me coins, and I would take the tray from them. We always had a blue tray, and they laid the coins on that. And so when I was taking the tray, they were taking it back. Do you understand anything about coins? That was normal. And then I started to, I had long fair hair at that time, really long hair. And so I started to have an elegant do with some looking like a very strict teacher with glasses. And so I developed a method. When anybody was coming in, first I would hand them my business card with a PhD on it. And then I would look at them rather strict. And so they didn't dare to ask, do you understand anything about coins?
And precisely on Coins Weekly, tell us a bit about your, how did you start this project? You told me it has something to do with your public relations company, FEMA Limited, right?
Yeah.
Tell me.
I worked at the in the coin trade in the auction houses for about 10 years. And after 10 years, I found for a woman, it's I wouldn't say it's undoable. I wouldn't say it's difficult, but it's a challenge each and every day. And I was tired of that. And I also was tired of, no, let's put it the other way around. I didn't have a talent to buy coins too cheap. Right. I always paid fair prices, and this was a very a period of the coin market where you really had to wait for a long time and take a lot of effort in order to sell the coins again for a fair price. So I was not a brilliant coin dealer. I was very good as an advisor. I was very good as a cataloger, but I was not brilliant as a coin dealer. And you have to know.
So honest for the trade.
I also was too honest for the trade. That also might be, but I have a lot of very honest colleagues too. Please don't get me wrong. There are a lot of honest coin dealers around, more than most collectors think. But you have to be clever in your calculation. There are a lot of coin dealers who are not so successful as they could be because they don't calculate right. And I would have belonged to them. That was it was not my gift.
Right.
So I decided I need to find something else. And I loved writing. From the very beginning, I was writing articles for public journals for collectors. And I thought, okay, let's try whether I would be able to find a job in this business. So I called the biggest coin journal of Germany at that time, and I said, hey, I'm looking for a job as chief editor. I know you are looking for one. Would you be interested in me working for you? And they said, yes, we would. And at that time, I needed an answer rather fast because I was thinking of quitting my other position. So I said, okay, I need a fast final answer. How long will it take you to discuss that with your partner and to think about it? And he said, oh, okay, give me half an hour. I thought that was fair.
Yes, half an hour, that's a quick answer.
Yeah. So I've worked 10 years in that field, and because it didn't bring enough money to pay the bills, I also started with writing auction previews. I knew from the coin trade, when I was also doing the cataloging, I knew that all these auction previews had to be written exactly when there is most work. because you have to finish your catalog, do all the corrections, do the typesetting together with the person from the printry, and nobody has time to write the auction preview.
Right.
So I was asked by Heiner Stotz from Loy whether I would be willing to work for them, and I said, okay, yeah. And he was the first, and rather fast, there were a lot of other companies who were also looking for that job. And so I started with this sidekick, and honestly, I earn more money with all the PR things we are doing for companies and than with the journal. The journal is kind of a hobby.
I see.
It's we are paid and it works, but in order to have all that done, it's okay. It's, you see, you have to be an enthusiast.
Of course. Numismatics has a lot of that.
Yeah, and that's why I like this work so much. And Coins Weekly works quite well. We have a lot of readers. We have a lot of interest. It's sometimes very, very funny how far Coins Weekly reaches. Like this week, this Christmas, I got an email from the Saudi Arabian Ministry of Culture.
Well, you were one of the organizers of the convention in Saudi Arabia, of the Numismatic Symposium, right?
Yeah. They asked me to help, and I said this was great because imagine a little company in Germany and the Saudi Arabian Ministry of Culture knows your name. Isn't that incredible?
It is, it's amazing, but it's also one more proof of your capabilities.
We try to be international.
And they really got big money for doing those things in Saudi Arabia, right? It was a
I don't think we should talk about things like that. I didn't work for free.
The 1,001 nights.
I have the feeling you don't have the right picture, the right image of Saudi Arabia. In Saudi Arabia, they are quite aware of what they pay and what they get. It's not like that.
No, of course.
They are very aware of cost, and they hate the feeling when they don't have cost control.
I see.
It was very interesting for me. It's I really appreciated to see this different mentality. It was quite interesting.
And the country is opening a lot in the last years.
Yes. Yes, it's opening a lot, and they want to open. And for me personal, I think it was important to go because as a woman, you can be a role model for young women there. And I saw this was appreciated by the young colleagues with which I had the honor to cooperate. Excellent.
Yes. That's very important for Saudi Arabian women. Exactly.
Yeah, I think that's really important.
So, well, that's great. And you have also Coins Weekly has a YouTube channel, which it surprised me that you don't allow comments, which is strange because you will get a lot of support from the YouTube numismatic community because people get to know you through this channel too, and you don't have to worry about any aggressive comments or anything because
it's not about worrying about the comments. We are never shy of discussing. And when you follow my editorials, you will find that I'm very open for discussion and not afraid of any any fair dispute. Why we do not have this kind of comment function is when we have it, we should answer. And we are a small team. We are a very small team that is doing a lot. And I'm afraid of the time it will take to write really good comments, because I hate to do a work just half. When somebody has a criticism, I want to take the criticism serious and to answer seriously.
Right.
And we don't have the all the people who could do that.
I understand.
So that's the reason why we do not have. That's the same with Coins Weekly. You have seen that Coins Weekly doesn't have a forum.
No.
It's simply due to the fact that we can't handle it. We can't. I see. We receive about 80 to 100 emails per day. Only Coins Weekly, only info Coins Weekly, not all the other directly.
Right.
And if that it would be in a Facebook or in another channel, it simply would not work. We can't answer all the question about which coin is that and which coin is that. It simply does not work.
I understand. I see. Moving to more controversial subjects. There is a lot of concern here in Argentina, but above all in Spain, for about the advance of heritage laws and restrictions, of course, motivated by these laws, which, of course, this seems to be a general tendency, a general trend, a worldwide trend, let's say, but in some countries is more noticeable, more serious, or is advancing faster than in other countries, right? Spain, well, I told you about a couple of cases, very, very worrying cases that happened in Spain, and about 60% or more of the public of this channel is from Spain. So you told me that this comes back, the origin of all this comes back to the 1970s, and I suspect you refer to the 1970 UNESCO Paris Convention. No,
I refer to something completely different, because in order to understand this conflict, we shouldn't go to what's going on the law side, but we should look at what happened. And in the late 1970s, these machines called metal detectors were not invented, but for the first time they were available for a broad public. They were cheap to buy. So at the same period of time, there was a boom on the coin market. People were looking for coins. They were paying high prices. That was a brilliant business. So what happened? Surprise, surprise. People in poor countries bought a metal detector and went to places where they found coins. Before, coin hoards normally came to light when some building measures, farmers were cutting apart, or and they were not disturbing the archaeologists. But what would you do as an efficient person with a metal detector who who does not earn money and wants to get money? You are going to the huge excavation fields, to the huge locations where you know there has to be something because people live there. And archaeologists suddenly realized that within their precious source floor, there were these huge holes. And they were screaming, yelling, shouting in order to avoid that. The problem is you can't avoid it at the place, because you need such an infrastructure. And southern Italy, Greece, all these countries in the Mediterranean, they didn't have these infrastructures.
Right.
So all these archaeologists were going to, and don't forget, archaeology is a child of the 19th century, which means archaeology is closely connected to the state. And in most states, like also in Germany, the Archaeological Institute is part of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs.
Right.
So the way from the archaeologist to the law, to the entities who decide about law,
right,
is very. At that point, not so many things did happen, but of course, there were. They tried to do it. It took about, I would say, about 10 years, a decade, before a real discussion started. I checked that today. My first discussion about cultural property issues has been in 2004, when I was invited by the Oxford Institute, the Ashmolean Museum, who had a colloquium, Who Owns Objects? So that was the time when the states started to think about how to change the situation. And one of the problems in my feeling is that archaeologists are over-exaggerating what can be done by forbidding trade. And on the other hand, there are still dealers and collectors who think they are living in the 1920s and don't want to have any laws at all. And now we are working on a compromise. And that's the problem. We need to find a compromise between these two groups of interest.
I see. Yeah, I agree.
So I agree 100%. A compromise should be reached on this. But I see there is also a lot of these patrimony laws, these heritage laws, etc., that are advancing on constitutional rights in many countries. Yep. And I think you agree on this.
Absolutely. We really have a huge problem because this is not about law. This is a kind of a religion. There are people who are so convinced that they are right to protect the heritage that they don't care when they are overstepping into civilian rights.
Exactly.
And this is a huge problem. And I have to confess, I have no solution for it, because those people are mainly employed by the state. They are abusing state powers in order to execute their personal conviction. I'm not sure whether that's the right word.
Beliefs or convictions, yes.
Yeah, they and I think that's a huge problem, and I only can advise any collector who is in the focus of any problems with concerning cultural property laws, immediately going to an advocate who is specialized in that field. Not any advocate, somebody who is who has specialized, because normally the law courts are still acting according to the law. In Germany, we had so many law cases where in the end the court was giving a judgment in favor of the collector.
Right.
But it takes a lot of nerves. It takes a lot of money.
A lot of money. Right?
It takes a lot of energy, and that's the reason why it's so scary that these officials are abusing their power.
Yes, because if you need a specialized lawyer to exercise your constitutional rights, well, that's hardly rule of law state.
On the other hand, I'm happy that we are living in states where we can have at least lawyers who are supporting us against the state. There are states where it does not work.
Well, Ursula, I read with much attention these columns by Peter Tompa is his name. Peter Tompa.
Yeah.
Excellent. That's a very valuable contribution, really, to our views.
Yeah, it's once again, it's important. But on the other side, we have to be careful what we protect, because it's not okay to buy coins that you are suspecting to come from a recent excavation.
Right.
And we all should know that. And we all should act according to that. The problem is that we have people from both sides to overstep regulations. And I have to confess that I was shocked by the criminal energy that made two honorable coin dealers invent a faked identity for coins. That is not done. We have a law. We have to. We have constitutional possibilities to help to shape the law in a way that is still allowing us to collect. And I think it's very important to do that. But when there is a law, sorry, I'm German, we have to follow the law.
Of course. But Germany is a country of countries, almost. It's a federal, so strongly federal nation that even heritage laws also are different according to it. No.
There is a different law of ownership when you find a coin or a hoard. There are different laws. They try to change that, but until now there are these different laws. But on the other hand, the law for protecting cultural heritage, that's a state law, and that's the same for all parts of Bavaria. There are different procedures of the officials, like everywhere. You have more efficient officials, you have less efficient officials. All officials are not as efficient as dealers would like them to be, but that's another thing. But it's the same law for all of Germany.
Right. It's a Bundesgesetz.
Yes, exactly. Exactly. Compliments for your German.
I studied German for 3 years, but I don't dare to speak with you in German. But I can read the books, at least.
So that's the most important.
So, but in Bavaria, for instance, the law says it has some kind of provision that of the kind of a finder keeper in many cases, right? If you find a hoard, it's yours, right?
Once again, let's summarize the historical perspective, because I think that's really interesting. There are two concepts of law when it comes to treasure troves. The one is the old Roman law that goes back to Emperor Hadrian, or it's called die Hadrianische Teilung. I don't know the English word, but sharing in a Hadrianic way would be a kind of translation. And this means that what is under the ground belongs to the owner of the ground, half, and belongs to the person who found it. Half. But you know, Europe was conquered by Germanic tribes, and they brought a different definition of what is to do with what is under the ground, because those emperors decided that everything that was under the ground was belonging to them. The Salic law. So we have a law that is coming from ancient time, competing with a law that has come from the high medieval period. I think it's rather interesting that we are still discussing
being a lawyer myself, it's very interesting.
Yeah, it's I always think it's funny how old our traditions are. And I might tell you a funny story. You know who was the first victim of the battle about the ownership of cultural objects found of court founds?
Yes, Richard the Lionheart.
So you read it. Yeah, indeed, I think he was.
Yes.
Because he was defending his right as a king and his
vassal.
Vessel, that's the word. Yeah, he was from southern France, where they had the Roman laws. So I personally think when he tried to get all these silver shields, that he was killed. And so you've read the article.
Yeah. Right? No, not the article, but I know the story. Yes, I know he died in that way. So
yeah.
Did you publish an article about that? I didn't read that. Excellent. So how is the situation in the numismatic trade in Germany? Did professional numismatists in Germany do something in common by some association or whatever against these advances of heritage laws, etc.? How did they protect themselves against this, and how collectors can protect themselves against this? Is there a way we can influence legislation, for instance?
I think it's a quite interesting story, because even when the law we have now is a law that doesn't make anybody happy, neither archaeologists nor coin collectors or dealers, it's a compromise. And when this the whole process started, it seemed to us that we would have no chance to interfere in any way in this law, because the responsible ministry wanted to have it. And they really pressed hard in order to get it. There was a huge media campaign they launched against collectors, against dealers. It was, for me, it was incredible how they slandered, I wouldn't call innocent dealers, but without giving people who were not guilty, found guilty in a lawish way. They it was really a campaign that was full of dirt and full of, it was incredible. And I have to confess, I still believe in justice. And when I see something that is not unfair, Unfair. Yeah, that's the word. That's unfair. I can't keep my mouth closed.
Yeah, me too.
So, yeah, so I got up and said, no, that's simply not the way to do it. I went to a conference in 2014 because I was lucky enough to be told by some insider that this conference would take place. And this was a conference I could never have imagined. It was a conference where the hosts didn't shake hands with me. They didn't look at me. It was, you felt like not only like an outsider, like a pariah, like a
pariah, right? Yeah.
It was incredible. It was for
me.
I'm
polite because these are basic.
Yeah, it was much more than unpoliteness. It was, but nevertheless, I went there. I said what I had to say, and I came back in my head that the idea in my head that we had to do something because this was a way they were treating innocent citizens. Should not have happened. At that point, I used my newly found Coins Weekly. Coins Weekly was then only a few years old. So, but I was really surprised how big the audience was that we could reach. So I decided to launch a campaign with signatures. And we had this campaign with the name, and I've written it down, for preserving the right to privately collect. The good thing in Germany was that all the associations were working together. It was not only me, but it was the Association of Coin Dealers. There are two in Germany. They both work together. Excellent. There was the Association of Dealers in Ancient Art who did a marvelous job. It was the Association of Art Dealers. It was the Association of Dealers in Ancient Books. We had about 20 associations who spoke up, and we had for this little campaign signatures within a few weeks. Nearly 50,000 signatures, about 1/3 coming from people abroad who supported our case. And it was very interesting because the ministry had stated that Germany is disgusted by all other nations because we have these laws and they want us to change the laws. And we could show them that there were big groups in Iran, Iraq, Egypt, all the Mediterranean countries who signed that they didn't want these laws in Germany.
Exactly.
They were supporting collecting. So we had this campaign, and on the other hand, we had some really good lawyers, and we had some fabulous, I would call them diplomats, who took a great effort in order to promote our case. I have to name at this place, I have to name Ulrich Künker. Ulrich Künker, one of the
owner of Künker.
One of the owners of Künker. And he did a great job as a diplomat, talking to the officials, talking to the ministry, talking to those who then had to finalize the law. And he always had lawyers with them. He had a very good way of talking to them. And let's put it like this. I was the street. I was bringing in the street credibility of all these little collectors who wanted to stay collectors.
Excellent.
And he had the lawyers. And together, we really formed, together with all other groups of interests, the law in a way. It's not perfect. Absolutely. We hate it. It's stupid. But we can live with it.
Right.
And you see
it respects the basics. It respects the basic rules for life for collectors, right?
It's the situation has become much better after the law was accepted, because it settled a compromise.
Right.
And of course, it's not perfect. What is perfect in our world? But it works.
The British law is like regarded as the most positive one for collectors. But somehow in Europe, in Spain, in France, in Italy, in the more controversial countries such Italy, Greece, right? Or Turkey, well, it's not in the European community, but it's the same model as Italy, or even worse, right? But in any case, it is more palatable for Spain, Italy, Greece, the German model, which is within the European Union, than the British model, which, I don't know.
The British model, in my opinion, is the best in the world.
But it is.
It takes effort and it takes money.
Yeah.
And there is a huge, I remember when I was at this Congress in 2014, and I told people, hey, look to Britain. It works. It works much better. They have better results in archaeology. They have a better cooperation. They have it. I had a boo through all of the room filled with archaeologists, because there are a few things that work in Britain that do not work in other states. First of all, Britain is a country where officials, they are very connected to the public.
Right.
Think of the police in London. They even don't have a weapon with them. No. It's very civil. When you look at the publications of the British Museum, they have a huge tradition of writing publications that can be understood by each and everybody. This is a tradition we do not have in many other states. In many other states, we have here the academics and here the rest of the world.
Yeah.
Academics don't interact with those dirty metal detectorists who are simply delighted by the feeling they might find something and who can't share their high thoughts. Okay, I'm exaggerating. There are a lot of archaeologists who are great guys. Please don't take I'm exaggerating. But it's a different.
There are so many jokes about German academics, right? they say that nobody believes that Martin Luther nailed the what was the name? The
thesis.
The 95 thesis, because German professors do not handle their own paperwork.
That's a nice joke, and I can understand that German academics have a kind of interesting reputation. Once again, I have fantastic friends who are in academia. They are, and they would tell you 10 better jokes. On the other hand, the system does not promote the interaction between these groups. It might change because for the first year we have now more people go to university than taking a handicraft. So it might change, but it used to be different. So this is one side, and the other side, of course, is the money. Great Britain is investing a lot of money into this project, and they are having great results. It has a very, very broad acceptance. I'm not sure whether this acceptance would be the same in Germany.
Right.
Look, we are a country where gold hoards are found and stolen and melted down. I think to me, that's heartbreaking.
Totally.
Most of the normal population wouldn't understand why I'm so sad about it. And that's also a problem of education.
It is.
So we have to start with very small children in order to develop a different way of thinking. And this is not a fast solution. So the British model might be not a fast solution for a lot of societies.
But I think a big part of the British model or British solution is that British have always collected things. They have always collected things and small coins of little value from the past. I mean, in general, right? Maybe from Roman times, maybe from Greek time, maybe. They do have an enormous value in making culture popular, right?
I don't think that's the point, because when you look from the historical point, then collecting is coming from Italy and has spread to the German-speaking countries much earlier than to Great Britain.
Right.
And there have been, in the 19th century, it was so typical and normal that in each and every village there was the doctor for medicine, there was the people who had the pharmacy, there was the teacher, and the priest. And those four groups were collecting coins. Normal. In each village, in each city, there was this group. Sometimes you even had an entrepreneur who was collecting coins. But you see all these small collections. I'm working on an exchange of letters between a Protestant priest and a Catholic nobleman, very low nobleman, not high nobility. He just owned a village and he died bankrupt, so a very low nobleman. But they were collecting, and the priest was brought coins from all the peasants who wanted to bring him presents, as was normal at that period of time, that you were honoring all your relationships with presents. So, and this is just one priest. It was all over Germany. It was all over Switzerland. So collecting is very old. And it's before researching coins. The first people who were researching coins were collectors. And it's long before archaeology.
Exactly. Well, that wanted to tell you also, don't you think that there is also something at risk here, which is the superior interest of numismatics as a science? Because if you look at Italy, tell me, you know very well this, tell me, did have been in Italy some important book, some important research made in the last 20 years, which is from the last Heritage Law 2004, right? Has really some very important research book on ancient Italian numismatics been published? No, I don't think. I don't know any, really.
That's a different problem. And the problem is, I know a lot of really good young numismatists and older numismatists who have done great research on Greek coins and also on Italian coins. But don't forget one thing. Italians speak Italian, publish in Italian. And therefore, the Italian numismatic literature is not taken as serious in the numismatic world as all the English literature. When you went to the International Numismatic Congress in Taormina, there were plenty of really talented, good young colleagues who are doing a great job. So I wouldn't connect that too much. And don't forget all the material they have in their museums. Like Italy is now one of the leading countries in researching Islamic coins, because they have huge collections of them, and Arianna Dottone is doing a great job in that field. So I wouldn't connect that too much. But on the other hand, and for me this is personally very sad, I know of many international auction houses who don't place any advertisement in any Italian numismatic journal. And as we all know, journals are only paid by advertisement. And this means that the great work Roberto Ganganelli is doing with his journal in the internet is not rewarded in the right way. And why? Because all these auction houses say, for heaven's sakes, we don't want any Italian clients because it's such an amount of work to bring coins from one side to the other side. No, we don't want to have this business. And I think that's sad.
In a certain point, these heritage laws have turned Italy into a pariah, in the numismatic world.
Absolutely. I would say into a pariah on the numismatic market. And especially with collectors, there are so really great collectors in Italy, but it's so much work to do the proper paperwork, and in most cases it's impossible.
Right.
But on the other hand, I have to say that in the last few weeks there has been a development that might show a different way. There are some remarks of very, very high officials in Italy that might change the attitude of Italy to ancient coins.
Right.
Because finally, what should they do with all the material?
Of course. Last week, I had a conversation similar to this with a friend in Italy, Massimo Gelli, which is a numismatist who is specializes in coins from Siena, medieval coins from Siena. And we talked a lot about laws and regulations in Italy. And yes, they have a lot of concern about this, and they say it is very, very, very complicated to buy, to sell, to export coins. And he told me something I didn't know, that in the deposits of Italian museums, there are 3 million ancient coins. 3 million. Which are mostly uncatalogued, inaccessible.
That doesn't surprise me at all. Doesn't surprise me at all.
Amazing.
My husband used to work for a museum in Switzerland. And before he started, all the coins were not catalogued. There was no photo. There was so whenever somebody was stealing things, like in Sweden, you know, the case in Sweden where all these coins have been stolen from the royal collection, they couldn't reconstruct which coins were there, because the person was also stealing the card file and they didn't have photos, so there is no chance for...
No photos for Interpol, nothing.
Nothing. So I also hope that there will be change, because there are programs right now which can catalog coins much faster than human beings with artificial intelligence. I've seen interesting efforts in Qatar, and I'm looking forward how this will develop, because I think we have to state where the coins are. And when we have a really strict barrier between those coins that are on the market and those that are not on the market, then we don't have this problem anymore.
I see. Yes, I work for the museum here in Buenos Aires. I am cataloging the collection of ancient Greek and Roman. The Greek coins are already, I have already cataloged, and I am working now on the Roman Imperial. Already have cataloged also the Roman Republican coins. There are not so many. It's not a huge collection. There are in the hundreds, not in the thousands, right? Unfortunately, 3 years ago, there was a theft. They stole the whole collection of ancient Greek and Roman coins. We recovered 600 and something out of 900 and something. But the remaining coins are nowhere to be found, unfortunately. Of course, I have a photographic archive of the coins, and if I find anyone, I will immediately report it. But
absolutely, and that's so necessary. There are good systems of reporting them, and with modern search machines for pictures, it's also possible to stay on the market in order to know what is sold now. I think it's the basic for every museum to have the photos of their coins.
Of course, it's capital. Well, Ursula, I don't want to steal you any more time. I know you're extremely busy, but I know this may make you feel a bit uncomfortable, but I want to tell you that my admiration for you is huge.
You see me blush.
And my gratitude for giving me so much time for us, for me, and for the followers of this channel. It's also huge. I will remain at your disposal for anything you need, anything, whatever. And please feel free to reach me whenever you want and ask me whatever you need from me and for my community, let's say. And I hope we can meet again for another talk, which was like this one, very funny, very amusing, very interesting, fascinating, and really important for all our concerns about what's happening with us collectors, mostly.
For me, it was a pleasure. It's a pleasure that the numismatic community is so interconnected, and I have to say that this also gives me hope, because because there is no other field in the world where you have people all over the world. And the feeling that wherever you go, you will meet fellow collectors. That's something that is making numismatics such an extraordinary hobby and an extraordinary passion. And so it was really a pleasure for me to talk to you. Please, to all of your community, thank you that I was invited. And keep collecting. It's the best thing you can do.
Goodbye.
Goodbye.